Let's do it. You give me that song, I'll give you that podcast. Hello and welcome to the Untranslatable podcast. We are here recording episode 165, and today we are going to be talking about which languages are the hardest to learn. So I think this will be a fun conversation. This episode is for you if you're thinking about, which language do I want to learn? I want a challenge. I want to really see if I can push my limits of my brain and my language learning capabilities. And we'll give you a couple languages today that you can try out and see if you are up to the task. And difficulty really ranges depending on your native language, so keep that in mind. So for our native English speaker listeners out there, some languages will be more difficult than others, and for our native any type of Asian language, so Chinese, Korean, Japanese, that will also be different as well. So keep those in mind as we're having our discussion today. So my podcasting expert to help me out, my good buddy Jared. What's going on, Jared?
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Untranslatable podcast. Welcome those loyal people that have been with us. Welcome new people. Hey, this is fun just for shits and giggles. Some of my favorite countries that I consistently see in our world map here of listeners. Russia. Hold on. Russia.
Привет.
Пожалуйста.
My soundboard is the most... I swear we have some sort of love-hate relationship to our Russian listeners.
Пожалуйста.
Thank you. Consistent. Canada's been going strong. Spain for months and months been going strong. France, Netherlands been going strong for a long time. However, some new ones that have stuck out, and I beg you, please don't leave us. And while you're here, give us 5-star reviews, I guess. Kazakhstan is going strong these days.
Oh, nice.
From like the past couple of weeks, Kazakhstan's been coming out of nowhere. Senegal, bro. Senegal.
Oh, sweet.
Keep listening,
Very
please.
nice.
We got... Last time a new episode came out, we got one download from Senegal. Please don't leave us. We beg you, and we love you. I realize I'm making weird noises now, but so I love seeing this stuff. It makes me so happy. So please spread a little love. Follow us on Instagram, Untranslatable Podcast, Twitter, Untranslatable1, the number 1. Let us know where you're listening from. Let us know where you're following from. You can email us, Untranslatable Podcast. I haven't said this in a while, but we'll happily take untranslatables. You tell us the...
Absolutely.
You give it to us in whatever the language is. Give us the literal translation of it. Then tell us what it means, and we'll say it. We would love to take them. It just means less work for us. Then, of course,
Spread a little love.
5-star reviews, especially from people like the Senegalese, the Russians, the Kazakhs, the Canadians, the English.
And you don't have to write it in English either.
That's true.
Feel free to write it in your native language.
That's true.
We'll figure it out one way or another.
Mm-hmm. This is the Untranslatable Podcast, but that's just a thing. We can
That is right.
translate stuff. It's 2020. I have a little interesting, quick interesting story that came across my plate the other day. I was talking to one of my friends, and he works for a big company, and he was telling me that he had coworkers from China. It's a giant company. They have offices all over the place. I'm not trying to blow up anyone's spot here, so we'll leave the company's name out of it. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, so he had Chinese coworkers coming in, and I was asking him about it. I was like, "Oh, my buddy Chad lives in China, and how was it?" And he's like, "It went well, almost too well. I felt like they were almost just telling us what we wanted to hear, and they were like sort of just pleasing us to please us." And he mentioned that he might have also been skewed by a documentary that came out a couple months ago on Netflix called American Factory. Have you heard of this?
I haven't, no.
American Factory came out a couple months ago, and it's about a Chinese company that started a automotive glass manufacturing company. So glass for your windshield, cars, glass for cars. You get it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it was a Chinese company that opened up offices in the U.S. and with the guy that opened it up brought with him about 100. Yeah, I'll just read this. In post-industrial, this is the little bio of it. In post-industrial, I'm going to watch this. This is why I'm bringing this up. I find this fascinating. In post-industrial Ohio, a Chinese billionaire opens a new factory in the husk of an abandoned General Motors plant, hiring 2,000 blue-collar Americans. Early days of hope and optimism give ways to setback as high-tech China clashes with working-class America. And so he hired about 2,000 blue-collar Americans, just factory-style workers. In addition to that, he brought about 100 Chinese workers from China to the U.S. And apparently, the reason why my friend was feeling kind of weird about the meeting, even though it went well, was because he said that he watched this documentary, and a lot of Chinese employees that work with Americans or work as expats in America get shown this video about American culture, and the video doesn't seem to be too flattering to Americans. So it's essentially saying that we're simple. It says that we need to be sort of placated. We need to be validated because we don't take criticism well, and we need to just be essentially told what they feel like we want to hear. And so my friend was like, I feel like this went well, but like I can't judge it because I don't know if I buy all of it 100%. So I'm gonna watch this.
Right.
The only reason I didn't watch it is because I just found out about this yesterday. I just haven't had time. But by the next episode, this documentary will be watched, and I would love to talk about it with you.
Yeah, it sounds really fascinating. If I can get the internet to work a little bit better here, I might give it a view as well. That sounds really interesting.
It's called American Factory.
I have a few opinions on that, why that may have gone the way it did as well. At least as far as I know, with my interactions with Chinese people, I've asked them questions like colleagues or other Chinese people who have been to my workshops. I've asked them for feedback on how to improve my workshops. And a lot of times the feedback I get is just compliments and, oh, this was good. I really like this, which is nice. But a lot of the feedback that I want is constructive criticism. Right. You could have done this better. You spent too much time talking about this. Exactly. And I think that there's something about, and I could be wrong, but I think there's something about Chinese culture that, especially if it's someone you don't know very well, you don't criticize them negatively. And I'm not sure if this has to do with losing face or what, but that's just what I've experienced here as well.
Does it feel like they're insulting or something if you're not just telling them what? I don't know. And maybe he screwed himself over by watching this documentary I don't think he watched this in preparation for that. I think he just happened to watch it and then he thought about it. But maybe he screwed himself over. Maybe it went great. Maybe it genuinely went great. And he's just like, oh no,
it could have.
I screwed everything up. But they were so nice, and I don't buy it. I don't buy it. So I don't know, but I found it interesting, and I was listening to him talk about this, and I'm like, oh, this is all I was thinking about was how we're going to talk about this on the podcast.
Oh yeah, I want to see it. I'm very curious.
All right, well, I'll definitely watch it.
Very curious.
So, ideally, just let's try to watch it by the next time we record one, because that's my goal.
I will. Yeah, I'll try to watch it tonight if I can. I'll see if I can convince my girlfriend to watch it with me. We'll see.
Okay. One more thing though. You're on essentially on vacation right now, aren't you? You have one more presentation.
Yep, I've been on vacation for a week. Yeah, my presentation comes up in a couple days in Harbin. So keep your eyes out, listeners, for an On the Road Again coming up very, very soon. You better believe it. You better believe it. I'm very excited. I'll be doing a workshop on games primarily not primarily, but games focused exclusively on speaking. So it should be a lot of fun. So I'm taking that games presentation and tweaking it to speaking. So it should be a great time. I'm really looking forward to it. We always have a lot of fun in my workshops, especially the games workshop, because all we're doing for an hour and a half is playing games. It's going to be pretty great. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, I've been on vacation for about a week.
I've been thankful that you've been sending me pictures from all your travels. That's upcoming travel. I'm more curious about travel that's already happened. I'm thankful that you've been sending me pictures from that travel. Yet I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes when I look at these pictures, I'm like, I'll like go to post something, and I'll be like, did I already post this? Like some of this stuff, look like a lot of it looks very familiar, like and very similar. But what are some of the things you've seen over the past couple days?
So I've been officially on vacation for about a week, and I've gone to, let's see here, Temple of Heaven in Beijing, which was great. One of the biggest temples. There's still one more temple I want to see called the Lama Temple, which I believe is I could be wrong, but I think it's a Buddhist temple. The Temple of Heaven, in hindsight, I should have gotten an audio guide. Didn't get an audio guide. Just walked around actually with my girlfriend's younger sister. She was still in town. So we did some sightseeing together. So that's how I had some pictures of myself that weren't selfies. She took those, so that was really great. And it was really cool.
Internship? Can she follow you around and do that all the time?
Well, sadly, she's back in Russia, so that won't work. But if she comes back again, I'll offer her an unpaid internship position. That's for sure. But yeah, Temple of Heaven was great. There was a lot of really cool. Like the way it works is a lot of the buildings in Chinese architecture are symmetrical. So, or like the layout of the architecture is symmetrical. So what that means is if you have a temple in the middle, you'll have another small building to the either east or west or north or south, depending on which direction. And so those buildings that used to be used, they a lot of times are called like a great hall is generally what the English translation is.
I'm looking at pictures. I see it now. I see it.
Right. And those buildings are usually used kind of now as like a small exhibit for a museum. So a lot of these great halls, so in the Temple of Heaven, for example, they had some artifacts from they've done renovations on it. I think the most recent renovation was in 2005. I could be wrong, but they did some renovations on it. So they had some of the original old stuff in there. They also had some paintings that depicted what the temple used to be used for in the past, which was also really interesting to see. The Temple of Heaven was a temple where they would burn offerings to the gods, and the emperor's son would usually do these ceremonies, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that was really cool. Temple of Heaven, and we were there for about 2.5 hours walking around. I think we saw everything. Oh no, we didn't. There was one building that we weren't able to see because if you don't get there early enough, usually they begin to close the entrances for the buildings around an hour before they close. So if they close at 5, if you are trying to get into a new building at 4 o'clock, you won't be able to. So I think that's a good tip for anybody visiting any buildings in Beijing that are like sightseeing buildings. Make sure you get there very early because if you only have an hour left, you most likely won't be able to get in. Then we also went to the Cultural Palace, which was really cool. Sadly, we made the same mistake again. We didn't know this until this happened the second time around, which was we wanted to get into the Forbidden City. And unfortunately, it was already closed by the time we had seen the Cultural Palace. So the Forbidden City is this huge... The crazy thing about sightseeing here in Beijing is that it's way bigger than you would think. I don't have the actual square meters or acres or anything, but it is huge. The Forbidden City is giant. Tiananmen Square is huge. Temple of Heaven is huge. So make sure if you do any sightseeing here, bring your comfortable walking shoes. That's right.
I look at the pictures that you've sent me, and there is... I mean, I don't know about the inside really, but there is noticeable amounts of open space. It like in the areas, at least where if you look at our Instagram, Untranslatable Podcast, you'll see this. But like in the pictures that you are in, there's a lot, like there's a lot of square footage behind you is what I'm getting at. I don't know what's on the other side of you.
Absolutely.
But I imagine there's a lot more square footage on the other side as well.
Most definitely, yeah. So make sure you spend a lot of time and you give yourself a lot of time because, yeah, it is very large. It was a little confusing, too. It took us a while to get to Tiananmen Square and the Forbidden City because our cab driver, we got stuck in traffic. And then he led us out to what I thought was like a 5-minute walk. Ended up being a 15-minute walk from where he led us out. And it was kind of confusing because there they have like a lot of, I think, 4 or 5 lane roads. So you have to go under the street and then up. And we went the wrong direction as well. So make sure if you go there, I would actually suggest if you're going to Tiananmen Square in the Forbidden City, actually take the subway because there's a subway stop right there. And as you exit the subway, you can't miss it. So that's even easier. And one last thing I saw, Jared, which was super cool, is called Wang Fujin. It's like a pedestrian shopping street. And it's really, really cool. I'll have to double check and see if I sent you those pictures.
I don't think
but
you did.
there were a bunch of awesome shops there. A lot of Western shops, but they also had a couple toy stores that were huge. And some of the toys were pretty cool to see. There were some Chinese versions of Disney characters. So they took Elsa and they made her look Asian. She was still blonde, but she looked Asian. So that was pretty cool.
Oh man,
to see
I
that.
I want to make a business doing that with turn like American Disney characters black or something. That would be fun. Like
Right. You could totally do it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sending you these now. And then one picture I just sent you as well is inside these malls, Jared, what's really crazy is they always have really, really crazy like displays. And so this display, when I saw it, it looked like something to me straight out of like Willy Wonka. So check that out. I sent those your way. And that is from the Wang Fujin shopping street, which is really cool in Beijing. So check that out.
Oh yeah. Oh, I did see this. You did send me you did send me this. I just had no idea what I was looking at. It just looked like a whole bunch of bubbles. I was like, what's all these weird bubbles?
Right.
But now that there's some context to them, I'll definitely post them. And you listeners that follow us on Instagram will know what you're looking at, because I was like, I don't really know what I'm looking at, so I didn't post this. So I did mention that. Let's circle back real quick. I did mention that sometimes when you send me these pictures of various historical or tourist attractions or whatever, they kind of sort of all blend together for me. Do you feel that way
very,
being
very similar.
There? Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way being there or being... Okay. I didn't know if it was just me as in pictures or if
my
you're
girlfriend's
actually there.
My girlfriend's sister and I were talking about that, how we went to Temple of Heaven first, and then the next day we went to the Cultural Palace and Tiananmen. And I think some of it is because some of the buildings are built around the same time. And if they're built by a similar dynasty, it'll be in the same architectural style. And I think also traditional Chinese architecture tends to, at least from what I've seen in Chufu and in Beijing, it has been generally the colors are red, blue, green, and gold. And usually there's ornate, generally speaking, there's ornate decorations in gold, which will have like dragons and other symbols, like on the beams of buildings, especially the entrance. And then if the buildings were used for the emperor, they'll have some animals on the top of the roof. I believe I sent you a picture of that as well with the different animals.
Yep. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and so the different animals are all to protect the building and the emperor. So it's pretty interesting, and I think a lot of that just comes from being built around the same time. I mean, if you look at European architecture built around the same time, obviously there will be some variance between different countries, but generally speaking, I think the styles are fairly similar. So I think that's why, but I could be wrong. I'm no expert on Chinese architecture.
Kind of like how the Rathaus in Vienna and Munich look almost identical, because it's the same sort of time and like a
also same
style.
Was it the same architect
actually,
as well?
I said that, I think it's actually because it's the same architect. So what I said was actually not true, but don't worry about it. Do you want to spread a little love?
I do, and it's very apropos to our new listener in Senegal. I have a shout out to the country of Senegal, especially President Macky Sall. He has an emerging Senegal plan, which aims to speed up Senegal's development. And what they are doing, Jared, is they have a wind farm coming up. So the wind farm will be completed by the middle of this year and supply 158 megawatts of clean energy, as well as increasing the country's energy supply by 15%. The wind farm has already started supplying the country with 50 megawatts to the national grid. Moreover, the wind farm will offset about 300,000 tons of carbon emissions annually, protecting the environment from climate change as well. So I think this is really amazing. It's really a path moving forward for Senegal and the entire continent of Africa.
You betcha.
And the region of West Africa as well. So I think that's really awesome and really great. So shout out and lots of love to Senegal and also President Macky Sall.
I've been plugging the shit out of our social media today, but I saw on Twitter, Untranslatable One on Twitter, that Akon, who's been known to do a lot of charitable work in Africa, specifically Senegal. I think he has roots in Senegal. I think that's where his parents and family's from and all that stuff. But I'm going to read a tweet that's Akon posted 2 days ago. Just finalized the agreement for Akon City in Senegal. Looking forward to hosting you there in the future. He's going to have his own city in Senegal. And I tweeted, I retweeted and said, looks like it's time for another On the Road Again episode. Going to Akon City. Akon. Convict.
That's awesome.
Music.
Music.
Right. Let's move on from this. It's enough singing of Akon.
There's never enough singing of Akon, Jared. Just to
true.
be sure. All right, let me start us off, Jared. I have a couple Indonesian phrases because I keep trying to flex on you a little bit, Jared, because I know you're in cold Michigan. I'll be going to Bali in a few weeks.
All right.
So I'm trying to learn some random Indonesian to help me out while I'm there. My first one for you, Jared, is buah bibir, which means fruit lips.
Fruit lips.
Yes, fruit lips.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Is that like you're sweet talking someone? Like you're like flirting?
You know, I could see where you are coming from, but let me give you a clue, Jared. Let me give you a clue. So, fruit lips is when. So, for example, the thing you just said about Akon, I would say could be fruit lips.
Good news. I don't know.
Okay, so let's take that word news, and it is related to the news. What draws you into a newspaper or an article?
Fruit lips is like a juicy headline.
There we go. Great job.
Fruit lips is a juicy headline. Wow.
To make headlines, but yeah.
Oh,
to make headlines.
Interesting. I don't even know where the connection would be on that one, but I like it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Our topic for today is difficult languages. And so all of my untranslatables will be from languages that we will later talk about as difficult languages. One of them, I just had to do some work around so I can actually just play it through the translator instead of actually say it, because that's never going to go well. The first one I think I can say, though, it's Arabic, and it's yagazma, and it just means shoe.
Shoe. Is it like darn?
It's darn-esque, but it's harsher than that, and you say it more. Well, that's going to give it away. Well, no, it's harsher than that, and you say it at someone.
Is it the F word in Arabic?
No, but it is like an insult. It is like a degrading insult. Arabs. Nothing can be more degrading than the bottom of a dirty shoe to Arabs. So it's essentially just like a deep insult, just saying yagazma. It's kind of similar to, as I believe we talked about, George Bush dodging shoes being thrown at him in, was it Iran or Iraq? One of those two. Afghanistan, one of those.
I'm not sure which. But yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that I've also heard as well, and I learned this from my students from Saudi Arabia when I was teaching them English, is you do not want to sit in a manner which shows or points the bottom of your shoe at someone.
Yes.
So, so that's a good little cultural tip for anyone going to an Arabic country.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Sometimes I'll like be walking around in my shoes and I'll think, damn, like I sometimes wear these shoes in my house and as I walk around like some gross club or something, I don't know,
Right.
or walk
Right.
through some fields. I'm like, oh man, I get it. All right,
That's
what do you
fair.
got for me,
So,
Chad?
Jared, my next one for you is also Indonesian and also in the fruit realm, which is buah tangan, which means fruit hand or hand fruit.
Hand fruit.
So when I go to Bali,
something
Jared, I definitely go ahead.
No, okay, yeah, I should guess before you give me the clue.
Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like I'm already on the wrong track. I was gonna say something that's like very simple, or something that's like a
Yeah, it's not that, but let me give you a clue, Jared. So when
Okay,
I go to
please.
Bali, I might want to bring some hand fruit back for my friends and family.
some like knickknacks or like a gift.
What's another word for it? Another word for it?
Souvenirs.
There we go. That's what
It
I was
took a
looking for.
second. I almost lost. I was like, what is it called?
There we go.
I try so
Yeah.
hard not to be a tourist. I don't even know what those words mean.
Did you get any souvenirs when you were in Toronto? Just curious.
No, I bought some. We had our neighbors across the street get our mail for us, and we bought like some Canadian chocolate that we gave them. Oh, we did get
cool.
2 bottles of
Okay.
wine. I told you we went on a wine tour. We did get 2 bottles of wine. One has already been
That's
drank.
a good souvenir right there.
Another one, we're saving for something. I don't know what, but if it were me, it'd already be gone
There you
by
go.
now. But
Nice.
that's my problem. But
Nothing wrong with
my
that.
girlfriend's like, no, we should save it for some special occasion. And I was like, okay. Anyway, my next one is Polish, and this is why I wanted to bring up the translator, because I know my history with Polish, and it's never good. But this is the Untranslatable podcast, and I will try. Then I'll actually do the actual
Oh, cool. Good.
computer saying it. Mijveja Vikizhny. Kijezhny. Mijveja Vikizhny. Okay.
Mieć węża w kieszeni. Mieć węża
Okay.
w kieszeni.
I wasn't that far off. I'm not gonna lie.
No, that was okay.
Not
And what does that mean, Jared?
It means, do you have a snake in your pocket? And then what I wrote after that, ... or are you just happy to see me? But that's not actually the saying. It just means, do you have a snake in your... That has nothing to do with anything. I just wrote that down because I'm
Do you have a
stupid.
snake in your
Do
pocket?
you have a snake in your pocket is the untranslatable.
Does it mean you like brought something unnecessary with you?
No. It's more like no, it's more like it's negative. First of all, I would say,
Okay.
and it's so let's say you and I were traveling together, and I was like, "Hey, Chad, let's go to a nice dinner in Chomutov at Republica
Republica?
and get a nice meal. Yeah, it'll cost a little bit, but in comparison to what we're used to in the U.S., it won't be that bad." And you're like, "What are you talking about? There's a great doner place right down the road. We can get a doner for 3 Czech crowns." And I'll be like, "Yeah, but we..." And I'll be like, "What, do you have a snake in your pocket or something? Let's go get a nice meal, you know?"
Oh, so to be a cheapskate.
Essentially, yeah. They say tight-fisted,
Okay.
but that means cheapskate, doesn't it?
Okay. Yeah. I would
Okay.
say so. When I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of
yeah.
tight-fisted, though, I think of the Arthur meme of him making the fist. But yeah, tight-fisting, I would say is, yeah. Or frugal. I feel like frugal doesn't quite have the same negative connotation as
frugal
tight-fisted.
is more like something
maybe.
someone would say about themselves, you know?
Right. True.
Try to
All right,
justify
let me give
their
you another.
tight-fistedness.
Right. Let me give you another Indonesian one, and then. Well, do you want an Indonesian one or a Chinese one?
Chinese. Save the Indonesian
all
one
right.
for... Well, you're going to be on the road again eventually in Bali. Save it.
Yep.
Save it.
I'll save it. All right. So, let me see here. So, here we go. Tian Wai Yo Tian, Ren Shang Yo Ren, which means there's heaven outside of heaven and a person above a person. What do you think this means, Jared? Heaven above heaven, person above person.
The world doesn't revolve around you.
Not quite. Not quite.
So good about that, too. You need to get your priorities straight, maybe?
Not quite. So think about it. There is a person above you. There is a heaven above heaven. So you might think you're here, but there's a person above you.
Respect your elders, or it's like the unknown, something about the unknown, or it's like don't. Just tell me this.
Also,
This is
no,
not going
I'm
well.
just going to give it to you, Jared. So it is. This basically means that there will always be someone who is better or more skilled than you, which I think is an important thing to keep in mind when you're learning a very difficult language, because you can always use these people. Maybe use isn't the correct word. Use them as a resource to help you learn some of these difficult languages.
Exploit.
So let's talk about them, Jared.
Way worse.
So our topic today is about some of the most difficult or hardest languages to learn. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, this really depends on what your native language is. So if you come from if you're an English native speaker, certain languages will be a bit easier for you to learn than others. Whereas if you are a native Russian speaker or Chinese or whatever, it will vary on what it is. And also this also depends on your own language learning capacity as well.
Of
so
course.
yeah, there are a lot of factors.
I agree with you 100%. But I think there does seem to be a relatively similar list that people can agree on of general difficult languages to learn, regardless of what your native tongue is. So, like, I tried my hardest to find, maybe not like it's harder to find. What I really wanted to find was like, well, we'll get to that later. What one thing I just wrote down just for my own self. Difficult aspects of language learning. So what is it? What are the different aspects of learning a language that can make that language so difficult? And I wrote down some, and I'm sure you could think of what comes to mind for you? What would make a language especially difficult for you to learn personally?
Well, in terms of reading and writing, a different alphabet system or using characters, if you're not used to characters. So that's a huge difficulty. I mean, that's one of my difficulties with Chinese. I will tell you, though, Jared, I can write the numbers in Chinese now, which isn't super helpful because they write most of the numbers now the same way we write the numbers. But if I do see like older buildings, like some of these ancient buildings here in China, if I see those and they have the Chinese numbers, I can tell you what numbers they are.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
Oh.
Also some common characters I can read now, like you see the character for people a lot, you see the character for water a lot, so I can read those. But I would say alphabet systems are make it difficult. Also different types of pronunciation. So if there are vowel sounds, consonant sounds, or tones that don't exist in your own language. And then I would say I would really bring it down to three main things, which would be the alphabet, the pronunciation, and then also the grammar. I would say those are kind of the three main aspects that I would think of what makes a language difficult to learn. So if the grammar is incredibly complicated, like in, I believe, Finnish, they have anywhere from, I think, 12 to 14 different cases. I think there are about 8 cases in Russian. There are 7 cases in Czech. There are 4 cases in German. In English, I think technically speaking, we don't really have any cases. I could be wrong about that, but at least the way they use cases
to me real quick.
A case. So a case is basically when the grammar will change in a way so you can tell. Like a case would be like, so in German, for example, you have 4 cases. You have the nominative case, which would be the subject of a sentence. So sorry for our non-grammar nerd listeners out there, but we're going to go into a quick grammar explanation. I'll do this with German, just so I know Jared can wrap his head around it, and I'll be able to explain it as well. So in German, we have the nominative case. So if we have a very basic German sentence, I have a friend named Jared. Okay, so ich is I in German, and that would be the nominative case. Ich habe einen Freund. The einen Freund here would be the accusative case, which would be the second case in German. I have a friend. And then we can use the dative case, or genitive case.
Is like belongs to.
Right. Ich habe einen Freund. Seines Namens Jared, for example.
Yeah.
Whose name is Jared, for example. And then in German, they also have a dative case, which is an indirect object. So if you have an object in a sentence and you have another object. So if I gave Jared a gift, I would say, ich schenke ihm, which is him in German, but the dative case, ich schenke ihm ein neues Handy. I gift him a new phone. So anyway, so cases are basically ways to, I can't give you a clear explanation. I wish I could, but cases are, it's basically an object. Let me consult.
I'll look it up.
Let me consult. Okay.
Don't look
But
it up
yeah,
because
so
whenever
cases-
you look it up, your internet goes on the
I was
fritz.
going to look it up on my phone, not on my computer. But go ahead and look it up.
I have a definition for you. Case is a special
Perfect.
grammatical category of a noun, pronoun, adjective, participle, or numeral.
There we go.
Whose value reflects
Much better.
the grammatical function performed by that word in a phrase, clause, or sentence. Now, I'll be honest with you, that sentence made almost no sense to me.
So basically what that means is a case is a way to kind of grammatically label an object, a subject, something like that. And that's why like cases in German make a lot of sense to me because grammatically speaking, they do make a lot of sense once you kind of understand them.
Some of them
And you
make
use
sense.
them, Jared, and you don't even know.
Genitive
Or maybe you do know.
makes perfect sense to me. But it's also one of the ones you probably use the least, really. Like, it's not the most common one
Right.
for sure.
It's used more in written and speaking. Written and writing and reading, yeah.
But
Correct.
then I think the ones I struggle with the most are probably going to be accusative and nominative. Sometimes those are the ones I find myself getting mixed up. I feel like dative I usually can figure out. Usually because that's often based off of what your preposition is
Right.
going to be. And they're pretty
Nominative,
clear
correct.
prepositions usually.
Nominative, you just need to figure out what the heck is the subject. And then you're done.
Yeah, no one thinks that much about their sentence though when they're talking, you know?
No.
Like
Right.
the subject and a part, all that stuff.
Right.
Anyway, I have a couple more that you didn't mention.
Oh, let's hear him.
My top one, relation to your native language. So it's
Okay,
probably going to
sure.
be easier for an Italian speaker to learn Spanish. Probably going to be easier for a Spanish person to
Portuguese.
learn Portuguese, for example, all that sort of stuff. French person to learn Spanish. That might be a little easier than, say, a Russian person trying to learn Spanish.
Right.
Vocabulary. So English has one of the widest vocabularies of all the world's languages, with over 500,000 words listed in the Oxford Dictionary, not including technical terminology, which makes vocabulary building seem a bit of like a climbing Everest. But take comfort in I'm reading something obviously, but take comfort in the fact that an average, take comfort in the fact that the average native English speaker only needs 3,000 words on a regular basis, and this 3,000 words will cover
that doesn't surprise me.
nearly 95% of everything you hear or read. And
Right.
so English would not be in one of those difficult lists because, yes, there's a wide vocabulary, but you don't need most of that. And the good thing about English is it's going to be the most accessible of languages. So it'll be the most easy to access these, like all these weird words that you might not recognize just because of social media, just because of internet. Like, I feel like
True.
there are a lot of non-English speakers or people that find themselves on
Right.
American websites or English-speaking, situations.
And for our non-native English listeners out there, a tip I can give you all is check out a website called thelearnersdictionary.com. They have a lot of great examples and very clear definitions of words. If you're not an advanced English speaker, if you're an advanced English speaker, you can just find it wherever you've been finding stuff. But if you're still a learner, check out the Learner's Dictionary. It's really great.
All right, Chad.
Jared, I'm going to be right back. I hear a knock on the door, and it might be the cleaning lady. So hold that thought one moment, Jared. I will be right back.
Well, while Chad's going to deal with this cleaning lady because, he's bougie, we're going to talk about some of the most difficult languages. But I'm going to be honest with you. These are never languages that, like It's got to be a weird, like, some of these languages are difficult, but, like, I don't even know some of these existed. So, like, of course they're difficult. They're going to be difficult if you've never heard of them. But I still think it's interesting to talk about. Chad talked about cases. So the obvious one to start with would be Polish. Now, Polish, as far as I've seen, is by no means the most difficult language to learn, but it is definitely difficult because, as Chad mentioned, German, we have 4 cases. Polish has 7. Now, as I mentioned, I can't even figure out the 4. I don't even know where to begin with 7. These cases don't make any sense to me. Where are they coming from with these cases? What sort of... Let me just read this. Number 10, Polish. Bringing up the rear with a familiar alphabet and a tame 7 cases in Polish. No big deal. While by no stretch an easy language to learn, it is a little less mind-boggling, or bottling if you're Ron Burgundy, than those above.
Right.
Though
Sorry
you
about
still
that,
have...
buddy.
I just kept going. I'm
delivery.
talking about, oh, you couldn't hear me. I'm still going. I'm talking about Polish.
Oh, cool.
Polish is number 10. Not number 10, but it's. I'm talking about I have a list of the hardest languages to learn, and Polish is consistently on this list, but it's consistently lower on the list on various lists. Mm-hmm. And I was talking about how Polish, as you mentioned, like Czech, has 7 cases, which I already said this before, just so you know, that makes no sense to me. Like, I struggle to understand the 4 that they have in German. I don't even know, like, I can't even understand how they would get to the 7. Like, what are you doing with a sentence that would involve so many cases?
Well, I can tell you, at least in Czech, they have a specific case if you are just simply like getting someone's attention. So you add a different ending to someone's name or the noun to get their attention. So like in English, if we would say like, excuse me, miss, or excuse me, bro, or whatever you say, that would have a different ending, for example. So you just have to think about, I guess, how you would use the language. And, in English, we just wouldn't have a case because we don't really have that type of grammatical rigidness, I guess, in English. But I think the difference to in English is we also don't have genders. And I know at least Czech has gender. I'm assuming Polish probably has gender as well.
They do. They have masculine, feminine, and neutral. Mm-hmm. And they also have personal, animate, and inanimate. That's where the 7 comes in. So as far as masculine goes, it's split into personal, animate, which means real or alive, and inanimate, which is like an object, like my phone or
object,
something.
Right.
And then they have feminine and neuter. But it seems like they only do personal, animate, and inanimate for masculine based off of how this little chart looks, which is interesting. So that's going to be obviously difficult. But I was reading something before you got here, but I'm going to read something else. From this point forward, the hardest languages get less hard, but are still challenging for English speakers. Polish got the number 3. Well, that's on their list. I've combined like 45 lists. Actually, it's 172 I've combined. Spelling and grammar are a couple of... No, I love... You didn't actually believe me, did you?
No, not really.
Oh, the way you said it, I was like, oh, poor thing. Spelling and grammar are a couple of areas in which Polish can give English speakers a hard time. Words are loaded with consonants, which makes them difficult to spell and pronounce. For example, SZCZ... ESCIE means happiness. BEZWZGLED means ruthless. That level of consonant makes no sense to our English-speaking brains because there's
especially our eyes too. Right.
All put in together as one. On the bright side, Polish uses a Latin alphabet, so the letters are similar to English characters. And so you don't have to relearn the alphabet. Yeah. Granted, there are a lot of accents that you will still have to learn. It's not just smooth sailing, just to be clear.
Right.
Polish, I imagine, has got to be relatively similar to Czech.
Yeah. I have a friend who's half Czech, half Polish, and he was saying that there are a lot of similarities, but he said that Polish people can understand Czech people much better than Czech people can understand Polish people. If that makes sense.
He's a good spot then, because he can understand both, I would imagine.
Right.
Because you said they also do have like the 7 cases as well.
Right.
So
I don't know if they're the same cases with Czech as they are in Polish. I couldn't tell you.
Right.
Because when I was learning Czech, I wasn't learning very much grammar. It was mostly very, very basic survival Czech.
Yeah, it's got to be way more actionable than that.
Right. And I also want to mention, Jared, during our main segment here, that I don't think that there is, as you mentioned with all these different lists, I don't think there is a set list of like everyone agrees that this language is the hardest or this language is the 10th hardest.
Now, I agree with you,
really,
but I'm also going to disagree with you on the number 1 spot, which we'll get to. But I definitely agree with you, where it's hard to really say what's the hardest because you have to factor in people's brains, you know? It's like when I go to when I go to a restaurant and I go to a place that say like has a Cheesecake Factory size menu and is just gigantic, my brain cannot handle that. Like I find myself skipping around, like I'll turn a page, read 2 entrees, go back and read a dessert for some reason, go and read a couple like my brain skips all over the place on menus like that. And so maybe that might challenge me with certain languages, or it might help me with other languages. Like, I don't know, you know? So there's definitely a lot of just, personal stuff that goes into it. But I think there is going to be, the higher you get up on the list, I think there's going to be some agreement on this. And we'll talk about it the higher we get. Like, I have a couple of these languages that I also mentioned while you were gone, that some of these languages are also hard because no one really speaks them, Like, for example, Icelandic is considered one of the most difficult languages to learn, but it's also spoken by less than 400,000 people. So I feel like that in itself will add to the difficulty. Much like I mentioned, English, you can't avoid it really, no matter where you're from. It's kind of hard to avoid, which makes it easier to learn.
True. So, and I also wonder too what Icelandic is related to. Is it which languages are similar? Because that also has a lot to do with, like, if you don't speak German, you'll still get bits and pieces of some German sentences because some words will be very similar. Now, obviously, there are some false friends or false cognates, but generally speaking, there are a lot of similarities between English words and German words. Also, even there are a lot of similarities between English and Spanish, or French and Spanish, Italian, or Italian and Spanish. So that also makes a difference. So Icelandic is number...
Well, this is just my own list. I'll say this. The numbers don't really mean anything, let's be honest. Although I will say they don't really mean anything except for the fact that I do feel like I'm trying to get harder as I go along. One thing about Icelandic that will make it difficult for a lot of people, and this brings up what you were talking about a second ago. The language is largely unchanged since Iceland was settled in the 9th and 10th centuries, and they're not.
Oh, cool.
And they don't popularly adopt a lot of foreign words. Icelandic instead opts to coin new words or give new meanings to old words. So they more change their own words and slangify their own words.
That's really cool.
Than adopting ours. So I would imagine that there's probably not going to be a lot of overlap. As far as
fun fact, though, Jared, about Iceland is in Iceland they have one of the highest numbers of authors because a lot of people, I guess, publish books in Iceland. So I think that's kind of cool.
Interesting. How do you know? All right. Anyway, that's an interesting fact.
Could be meme news, but it is a fun fact, regardless. So what else is difficult about Icelandic?
That's all I got. It's just all this makes learning it a challenge. That's all I got. It also, other than the fact that it's remote, that's really makes it difficult too. That's going to be not a full theme as you see, but it's definitely a theme for some of these where it's just like you just don't have the access to them. Like for example, Navajo is one that's very difficult. But Navajo is probably spoken by
which is a Native American language.
Yes, it's a good thing to mention. Probably spoken by way less than those, a way smaller number than the Icelandic number. And Navajo is a verb-centered language where descriptions are given through verbs, and most English adjectives have no direct translation into Navajo. There are a number of sounds in Navajo that have no equivalent to an English speaker, which makes pronunciation especially difficult.
Now, I could be wrong about this, Jared, so if you wouldn't mind just Googling it really quick for me. But I thought I heard somewhere that the difficulty with learning a lot of native languages, not even Native American, but just indigenous people's languages, is that a lot of these languages don't have any written form. Now, I'm sure Navajo has been adapted because I've seen books on Navajo, which means that they have figured out a way to write it. But I think traditionally these languages were all taught orally, taught through stories and things like this. Could you double check and make sure I'm not spreading fake news here? But I think that's true.
I think you're right. I'm just looking at a few different, like, for example, the Sioux, which is another Native American tribe, did not have written languages. I'm looking at, there's another one I just saw, Aboriginals in Australia did not have a written language. So I'd say, I'm just looking at a bunch of random examples, but I'd say in general it seems like it seems like you're on the right track on that one.
Okay.
And because of that, also a lot of those languages are passed down verbally and through families, so that could just lead to a lot of, I don't know, various interpretations, a lot of changes just through, like, the game of telephone happening and people mishearing one word for another. Who knows?
Right.
Another one.
So give us these other difficult languages, Jared. Yeah, just go through the list real quick.
Yeah. Now, I'm just gonna go through the list real quick, and then I'm gonna get to the ones that I really want to talk about. Basque. Have you heard of Basque?
Yep.
Is a language isolate, which means it's an isolated language, but it borrowed vocabulary from Romance languages. It's written and spoken. Is distinct from any other language. Where is Basque spoken? Basque is spoken by about 700,000 people in. It's like a variation of Spanish and French. Interesting. I've never even really heard of that. Finnish, sure, okay. Korean. You're going to deal with a new alphabet already.
Character system,
at least for us. Yeah, so that's going to be difficult. As the most spoken language isolate. Interesting. So that means like it's the biggest spoken language, but it's also the most concentrated to a specific area.
That would make sense. Yeah. Because where Korea is located.
A language with no demonstrable genealogical relationship to other languages. Korean is an especially unique language. For instance, when describing an action in Korean, the subject goes first, then the object, and finally the sentence ends with the action. Practically, this means saying, I water drink. So it's kind of Yoda-ish, opposed to I drink water. Hungarian, similar to like Korean, I believe Hungarian has no relation to other European or other languages.
Correct.
26.
Hungarian and Finnish in terms of European languages are way out there. Just kind of on that.
Yeah, no relation. Speaking of no relation, 26 cases, Chad.
In Hungarian?
26 cases in the Hungarian.
Wow, that's a lot.
Hungarian has some of the most difficult grammar rules you'll come across. Hungarian suffixes dictate tenses and possession instead of the word order, which is how most European languages tackle the problem, is through word order. So like in German, usually they'll tackle that by putting the verb at the end. If say there's two verbs or you're trying to say something in the past or something like that. Moreover, subtle cultural elements within Hungarian make it uniquely difficult to learn, especially since Hungarian is a very small and unique culture. So they say cultural differences, but like those aren't differences you'll find in any other culture, really. Top three.
Right.
We'll finish this off by what do you think are the top three generally agreed upon most difficult languages? 3, 2, 1. Can you do it in that order for me?
3, 2, 1.
Or just name them if that's too difficult. I don't want to. That sounds a little difficult now that I think about it.
Well, I would probably say This is in no specific like order of difficulty, but Arabic, Chinese, and Japanese would be my guess. Or maybe Arabic. I'm going to give you 4, Jared. Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, and Russian. I'm going to give you 4.
That was perfect. Yeah, that was perfect. My list consists of what I was thinking as the top 3 was going to be Mandarin, number 1, Arabic, number 2, Japanese, number 3. However, on some other lists I see, Russian commonly comes up as usually actually definitely after Arabic and Mandarin. Arabic and Mandarin are consistently gonna be the number 1 and 2 that I see, with Mandarin almost always being number 1, Arabic almost always being number 2. However, Russian is, according to Babbel, is their 4th hardest language to learn, using a Cyrillic alphabet made up of letters both familiar and unfamiliar to us. But speaker beware. Some of the Cyrillic letters may look familiar, but make a different sound than the Latin letter they resemble. I've seen that before. When talking
a C sound in Russian is an S, for example.
For instance, though, B in the Cyrillic alphabet makes a V sound. Grammatically, Russian is not as difficult as Polish, but pretty darn close. Polish has 7 cases, Russian has 6. Russians omit the verb to be in the present tense, which can throw beginners for a loop when they try to form basic sentences. In Russian, I am a student would simply translate to I student. iCarly, great show. Like Polish, Russian uses a lot of consonants clustered together, which makes spelling and pronunciation a challenge. Despite its difficulty, Russian might be worth the extra effort to learn. It's extremely politically and culturally relevant. It opens the doors to numerous career and leisure opportunities, and it's it's a pretty Russia's a big country, so it's useful.
I'm trying to learn it. That's on my list of languages to learn. Obviously, my fact that my girlfriend's Russian also plays a role in that too. But but Russian's difficult.
So we talked about the top 3, but I want to talk about quickly. We'll skip Japanese. We understand why Japanese would be difficult. It's not really related to much. There are 3 different writing systems, and obviously characters are different. But I want to talk about Arabic real quick. Arabic is different, not only because obviously the alphabet's different, but to complicate, vowels are not included when writing. This makes translation a much more difficult task in Arabic, I guess, especially transliteration too, than most other languages. On top of that, Arabic has a lot of different dialects. Like, Arabic is very widely spoken in a lot of different countries across multiple continents. And so you're going to get a wide variety, obviously. It's like, that's just what's going to happen. Usually...
And...
What I've seen is that when someone is saying Arabic and it's just an Arabic thing and they don't specify, usually what I've seen is that it's Egyptian-based Arabic for some reason. I don't know why that is. But.
But with that being said, I don't know if there's an agreed upon standard version of Arabic. Like, there's a standard version of German that's taught and learned in schools.
Yeah, the Hochdeutsch, the High German, as they call it.
In English, it's a little difficult because some people do try to teach the Queen's English. I obviously don't, as an American. I've been corrected by British people many times when I say I'm an English teacher. They'll say, "No, bloke, you're an American English teacher." And I'm like, "Well, I guess you're right."
Chad. Yeah, I said it. Tell that person to go fuck himself.
All right, I'll say my friend Jared tells you to go fuck yourself. I'll make sure to spread the word, Jared.
I would say this though, is that, like, I get the feeling though it's going to be a lot more difficult for maybe an Arabic person from an African country versus an Arabic person from a Middle Eastern country to communicate smoothly than it would be for, like, us talking to a British person, which is essentially no challenge for either of us to understand each other.
Right.
We might hear one random word where it's like, what does that mean? But then then either of us will probably know their version of it, So it's like, the boot, what is that? The trunk, sorry, that's what you guys call it. It's like, that's what it would be for us. I feel like it would be a little more complicated for Arabic. Chinese,
I would agree with you.
Or Mandarin, Chad. Are you surprised to see this one as number 1?
Nope. Well, I will say this. In terms of, like, our parameters of what makes learning a language difficult, I think the reading and writing is very, very difficult if you're not from a language where you read characters. I will say this, though. I don't think Chinese or Mandarin grammar is very complicated. It is difficult for me to hear, not to hear, but to make sure I'm saying the tones correctly. So I think the tones make it difficult, and also reading and writing. Now, grammar, though, the nice thing is, for example, in Mandarin, there's no conjugation. So it's I have, he have, she have, we have, you have. They also have no change in tense. So it's, in English you could say I have had, I had,
So there's
I
no
am
past
having,
tense.
I will have, I am going to have. These are all different tenses in English.
So you would say,
so that's what
if
makes
you wanna
English
say,
difficult.
Like something in the future, you would say, I want to, like, I go to the store in next week. I don't know.
Right. I think exactly. I think you add a time. I'm pretty sure you add a time. I have a couple, before we move on, Jared, I have a couple honorable mentions, which are also very difficult languages to learn. I think Cantonese is another one, which is spoken in the south of China, in Hong Kong and Macau. Like Mandarin, Cantonese is a tonal language, but there are actually 8 different tones. So it doubles. So in Mandarin, there's only 4. In Cantonese, there are 8. Another one, honorable mention, is Vietnamese. So Vietnamese is also a tonal language with 6 different tones. There are a high number of different vowel sounds, which can prove difficult for English language speakers to nail down. As for the grammar, Vietnamese has more pronouns than English and uses a system of classifiers, which are special words that modify nouns in certain contexts. So if you're an English speaker, you do not have exposure to this.
And I just want to say
Another
real quick,
honorable mention. Yeah.
the tones should not go, like the tones I feel like should not be passed by. Like that's something
definitely
that
not.
me as an American that has attempted to learn other European languages, like I don't even really understand. Like I understand, obviously I understand what it is, but I don't like those are things that I can't even really hear. Like you don't really even recognize them. But they're a important
think
part
you
of,
do
of what a word is.
I think you do recognize them if you've gotten enough exposure to native speakers speaking it. I think you do begin, because I can recognize them. Now, recognizing them and me being able to speak them myself are two very, very different stories. All right, I have a couple more honorable mentions, Jared. Xhosa, which is spoken in South Africa, Zimbabwe. South Africa
I think
and
it's
Zimbabwe.
actually Xhosa, if I'm not mistaken. I think you click that X. Don't you?
See, that's one of the reasons why it's difficult, Jared. It's one of many African languages that uses click consonants. It has 18 clicks that get articulated in 3 different places.
18 clicks? What the hell?
The back of the teeth, the roof of the mouth, and the side of the mouth. Additionally, Xhosa, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong to any of our South African listeners out there.
Hold on a second.
Yes, and also it's a tonal language with 2 tones, high and low. Speakers must indicate one of 15 noun cases that must agree with the noun's gender. And Xhosa is what linguists call agglutinative language, which means it has a ton of prefixes and suffixes that get attached to words in certain contexts. So there you go. So yeah, there are a lot of different languages. Now, what's interesting, Jared, is a website, which is a website for language learning, called mosalingua.com. Check them out. It's a great website. What's interesting, though, Jared, is I've looked at a lot of lists as well, and Mosalingua actually lists German as the 6th difficult language to learn, which I'm not really sure if I necessarily agree with that. But they say one of the reasons German can be difficult is because of the gender and because of the cases. And if you and pronunciation in German can be difficult, depending on what native language you come from. So, Jared, now that we've talked about these difficult languages, I want to give our listeners out there some tips on how to learn some of these most difficult languages. Because difficult, Jared, does not necessarily mean that you can't learn it, right? Difficult doesn't mean impossible. So I want to give a few tips for how to learn some of these languages, okay? So number one is, depending on the writing system, I would say try to do some reading and do some writing with the writing system. So for example, actually, hopefully if I have time today, I am finally going to this really cool bookstore in Beijing, and I'm going to buy the most common 200 characters of Chinese and learn how to write characters. And I think being able to write the characters will obviously help you read the characters. So that would be one tip in terms of writing system. If you're learning a new alphabet like Arabic or Russian, which is a Cyrillic alphabet, try to also write the words. That will really help, I think, in your mind, solidify how to, I would say, as you write them, also pronounce them would be a tip as well. Another tip is push yourself to have conversations with people in the language. Even if you're a beginner, just trying will give you so much confidence. In the beginning, you might feel very stupid because you can't really express yourself. But I think that's another really great tip, is just push yourself and try to have conversations. You'll learn a lot of new words and get a lot of different things. Also, the frequency of your study, Jared, is very, very important. It's more important to study frequently than study for 4 hours only once a week. So try to make sure that you study very frequently.
See, Chad?
And then when you
we need each
use, when you learn a new word, it's very important to try to use it.
So I can
and
see
whether
where it's
that
at
be
on my recording.
write it down in a notebook or say it a lot, something like that.
Yeah. Although you just went
and
black
the call.
and white. Like now you're all darkened. What just happened?
All right. I don't know. Weird. Nope. Ugh. And now I don't see you at all.
You see
There
me
we
now?
go. Now
All
I
right,
see
yeah,
you.
you just went
All right.
black and white.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to clap again. So, a few more tips left for all of our language learners out there. So my last one was when you learn a new word, use it a few times right away. So either speaking, writing, try to use it.
I try to do that in English, too.
Label your apartment like a... Right. Yeah. Also, I think one of the most important tips out there, no matter how difficult, make the learning fun. So either play some games or even just pat yourself on the back, for taking 15 minutes out of your day to try to do something difficult. I know when I've been trying to learn Russian and Chinese or Mandarin, my brain feels like it's, turned into mush or turned into like pudding. So I always have to remind myself, you're working hard, give yourself a little treat or a pat on the back. I know it sounds cheesy, but I think it's important throughout the process to do that. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. I mentioned that, use people who are better than you as a resource to help you learn the language. So I asked my girlfriend questions about Russian quite a bit. How to say this. My favorite phrase in Russian is "как сказать," which means "how do you say?" So
that's my favorite.
Make sure to learn from them. Also, the last one. Well, all right, I'll give you two more. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, especially with difficult languages. The more difficult the language, I would assume the more frequent the mistakes will be until you really internalize the language. But my last tip for all of you out there is find a language buddy. Find someone, either a native speaker or a non-native speaker who is better than you to learn the language with, to talk to write with, all of that good stuff. So those are my tips to learn some of these hard languages. These are really general tips to learning any language, but keep those in mind. So with that being said, Jared, one way to have fun and take a little break after you learn some hard languages is to listen to some great music. And today I think we have an amazing song for all of you to enjoy. It is called Enjoy Your Life, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Yes, Jared?
It is.
By Obi Onyoha. I'm not sure if I said that right, but...
Onyoha? Yeah. This song I found, I guess my sister shared it with me a while ago. It's by a Nigerian singer. The song came out in the 80s. And it has, are those like funk vibes? Is that funk that I'm hearing?
It's a weird...
it's
a weird,
it's
like...
oldies vibe.
I don't know if it's oldies. I would say it has like a funk soul meets disco vibe.
Yes,
was
disco.
the vibe I got from it.
I can hear some disco in there. I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, it's great. She's got a beautiful voice. It's in English,
Absolutely.
so I mean, yeah, she's Nigerian. But if you're an English speaker, you'll understand it. It's very of the time, Like if you granted. If you would ask me where the song came out, I would either guess 70s or 80s. It's from the 80s, but it's very of that time, and I love that time. I love that time of music. I love 80s music. and I love this song. I like the like what I like about the 80s music is that like they just figured out how to make beats with computers. And sometimes it seems like they go a little further than they need to, but I kind of like it. Like it seemed like at some points they slightly overdid it just to impress us with their ability to use Fruity Loops or whatever they were using back in the 80s. Probably not Fruity Loops, but I like it nonetheless. I thought it was a good times had by all.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great song. So check that out on our YouTube channel. Enjoy Your Life by Obi Onyoha at our Song of the Pod playlist. You will definitely enjoy it. So, Jared, my Chinese word of the pod today, and depending on if I pronounce this correctly or not, it either means difficult or it means south. Nan. And nan, I think I said it right, means difficult. So, yeah. I think that's a very appropriate word for today's episode. So, Jared, what is your Spanish word of the pod?
Great minds think alike, Chad. And spoiler alert, but my Spanish word of the pod is difícil.
Difficult.
Difícil, I guess I should say, because the accent's on the second I after that. So difícil.
Oh, there we go.
That's actually what it is. Speaking of emphasis.
Yeah.
And yeah, it means difficult.
So, to recap today's episode, I think depending on the alphabet, the grammar, and the pronunciation, as well as the distance from your native language, will really influence what languages will be difficult for you to learn or not. So keep that in mind. But I also think a lot of it has to do with exposure. So I really think if I live in China long enough, I'll become fairly proficient in Chinese if I live here for a long time and if I really work hard in learning Chinese. A lot of it comes down to effort. If you're willing to make the effort and overcome some of these difficulties, I think it definitely is very attainable to learn these languages. I mean, there are plenty of living examples of polyglots who speak 15 to 20 languages and they can speak some of these very difficult languages. So don't get down on yourself if you're trying to learn these languages. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. And remember, make language learning fun. Find a language buddy. Try to get lots of exposure to the language. And just keep on chugling, as the Creedence Clearwater Revival would say. Keep on chugling. I love that phrase. So let us know.
I've never heard that before, but that's hilarious.
It's a good one. So let us know what languages you're learning, whether they're easy or difficult, and what steps or tricks that you use to keep it fun and to continue learning some of these difficult languages at untranslatablepodcast@gmail.com. Check out our Instagram for all of our different travel shenanigans and whatnot, Untranslatable Podcast. And lastly, please, 5-star reviews on iTunes and Stitcher, and let us know how we can make this podcast better for you. We would really appreciate it. So as we say here at the Untranslatable Podcast, dziękujemy, muchas gracias, and 谢谢.